It all began quietly, almost unnoticed. Humanity had grown used to the hum of satellites, probes, and distant signals that crossed the vastness of space. Every day, scientists monitored signals from deep space, searching for something extraordinary. Most of the time, the signals turned out to be natural phenomena bursts of radiation, pulses from distant stars, or the subtle vibrations of black holes. But one day, something unusual appeared on the monitors, and it immediately captured the attention of everyone in the global scientific community. The signal was unlike anything humans had ever detected before. At first, it seemed random, just another anomaly that might be explained by interference from solar storms. But as days passed, patterns emerged. The signals repeated at precise intervals, almost like a language or code. Scientists across the world began sharing data and noticed the same pattern independently. It wasn't just random noise, it was deliberate. There was intelligence behind it. His discovery sent a ripple of awe, excitement, and fear through Earth's scientific and political communities. The idea that humans might not be alone in the universe was thrilling, but there was an unsettling edge to this realization. Something about the signal felt different from previous discoveries. Unlike friendly, exploratory probes or faint signs of microbial life, this signal suggested a species capable of advanced thought and possibly hostility. Governments quietly convened the emergency meetings. Military leaders, scientists, and space agencies from all corners of the planet were brought together to analyze the data. Every detail of the signal was examined, and the pattern suggested not just communication, but surveillance. Whoever was sending these signals had been observing humanity for some time. The thought was chilling. Humans had always imagined aliens as distant and abstract, but this was no distant curiosity. This was attention. Astronomers were the first to notice the movement of the fleet before anyone else. Through powerful telescopes and deep space tracking systems, they detected several small ships entering the outer edges of the solar system. Initially, it was unclear whether these ships were probes, exploration vessels, or something more threatening. The idea that an unknown species had approached humanity's domain without warning was alarming. The first few days were tense. No communication came from the newcomers, and their movements were cautious but deliberate. Earth's defense systems were quietly put on alert, but no one wanted to escalate the situation too quickly. The world remembered past stories of misunderstanding between humans. Themselves misreading intentions often led to unnecessary conflict. Leaders hoped that perhaps this species was simply curious, not hostile. As time passed, the ships moved closer. Satellites in orbit captured detailed images, and the first clear visuals of the alien technology shocked the world. The ships were unlike anything humans had ever built. Their shapes were fluid and asymmetrical, almost organic, as if they had grown rather than been constructed. The surface shimmered with materials that seemed to shift colors depending on the angle of the light, giving them an eerie, almost alive quality. Military analysts struggled to determine their capabilities. As conventional weapons had no clear target or weak point, the global response was cautious at first. Scientists tried to establish contact. Messages were sent using a variety of methods: radio signals, coded light pulses, even mathematical sequences meant to convey intelligence without threat. Days turned into weeks, and each attempt was met with silence. Or worse, subtle interference. The aliens seemed aware of the messages, but made no effort to respond in kind. Their presence was intentional, and it was clear they were observing humanity closely. Tension grew rapidly. Rumors began to spread among the public and the media. Some saw hope, imagining the potential for contact with a wise and advanced civilization. Others feared disaster, recalling fictional stories of alien invasions. Governments were pressured to act, but action was not straightforward. There was no precedent for dealing with intelligent species beyond Earth, and any misstep could provoke unknown consequences. Behind the scenes, a quiet battle of information and preparation began. Earth's military forces worked to understand the alien ships' movement patterns and predict their next steps. Scientists collaborated to decode the signals, looking for hidden messages or warnings. Intelligence agencies monitored every anomaly in the outer solar system, trying to anticipate the newcomers' intentions. Everyone involved understood one unspoken truth: if this species was hostile, humanity's survival might depend on preparation. Then, the first clear act of aggression occurred not through weapons, but through testing. One of the alien ships approached a remote outpost on the edge of human-controlled space. The outpost was small, designed mainly for observation, research, and communication monitoring. For a long time, it had been a quiet outpost, serving as humanity's listening post to the stars. Without warning, the alien ship emitted a pulse of energy that disabled all electronic systems at the outpost. Communications were jammed, and sensors went offline. The humans stationed there watched helplessly as the ship hovered above, scanning, studying, as if testing their defenses. It became painfully clear that this species was not interested in friendship or negotiation. This was a test of humanity's response, a probe to understand how humans would react under pressure. Global leaders realized the gravity of the situation. The peaceful approach they had initially hoped for was no longer viable. The species, which scientists later identified as the Vorthek, viewed humanity as a threat or an obstacle. They seemed to measure human capabilities and strategy, analyzing weaknesses and preparing for future conflict. Earth's leaders convened emergency summits, recognizing that the time for waiting might soon be over. In laboratories and command centers around the world, humans began to prepare. Engineers and scientists worked on advanced defensive technologies, while military strategists devised plans to respond to potential attacks. Humanity had never faced a threat of this scale before, an intelligent species observing and capable of overwhelming technology. But even as fear grew, determination did too. Humans had survived countless challenges throughout history, and the idea of surrender was unacceptable. Amid the tension, everyday life continued, though under a cloud of uncertainty. Citizens went about their work, children played, and cities hummed with daily routines. Yet beneath the surface, there was a shared sense of anticipation, a quiet awareness that the world had changed forever. Every person, from scientists in labs to farmers tending their fields, felt the subtle impact of the Vorthek's presence. Humanity was no longer alone, and the rules of survival had suddenly expanded to the cosmos. Some leaders warned against overreaction, arguing that misinterpreting the Vorthek's actions could lead to needless conflict. Others insisted that preparation for war was the only reasonable path. Debates raged in quiet halls, far from the public eye, as humanity collectively faced the unknown. It was a delicate balance acting. Too aggressively could provoke destruction. While waiting could leave Earth vulnerable to an attack, it could not withstand then. In a moment that would be remembered for generations, the Vorthek made their next move. They approached one of humanity's largest observation satellites, a crucial hub for monitoring space traffic and early warning systems. The ship emitted a controlled burst of energy, disabling the satellite's functions and sending shockwaves through Earth's space agencies. Scientists and engineers scrambled to regain control. But the message was clear. The Vorthek were capable of precision strikes and were testing the limits of human resilience. By now, the full scale of the situation was undeniable. Humanity was dealing with a species capable of intelligent planning, technological superiority, and strategic aggression. The world's governments moved from debate to action. Emergency meetings turned into task forces, alliances strengthened, and resources were mobilized. Humans had faced adversity before, but this challenge was unlike any in history. It demanded cooperation on a global scale and the willingness to confront the unknown. Yet even in the face of fear, there was hope. Humanity had always adapted, always found a way to survive. The same curiosity that had led humans to explore space now fueled their determination to understand the Vorthik. Scientists continued to analyze the signals, searching for patterns that might reveal weaknesses or opportunities. Engineers worked tirelessly to develop technologies that could level the playing field. And behind closed doors, military leaders prepared plans that could protect Earth if the situation escalated further. As the first part of this unprecedented encounter unfolded, one thing became certain: humanity had been noticed, and the universe was no longer a distant, passive space. Every move mattered, every decision carried weight, and the survival of the species could hinge on the choices made in the days and weeks to come. The story of humanity's first real challenge in the cosmos was only beginning, and the outcome remained uncertain. One thing was clear: no species had ever tested humans in this way, and the world was about to witness a confrontation that would reshape the future forever. The quiet hum of space had grown louder, filled with tension, curiosity, and the knowledge that humanity's greatest test had arrived. Humanity was now fully aware that the Vorthik were not just curious observers. They were a species with intent, and that intent was unsettling. After the first acts of interference and testing, world leaders realized that the window for cautious diplomacy might already be closing. There was an urgent need to understand Vorthik's intentions before they escalated their actions into full-scale attacks. The initial plan was cautious. Humanity's top scientists and diplomats came together to craft messages of peace. These messages were designed to communicate that humans meant no harm, that Earth had no interest in conflict, and that communication could benefit both species. Every signal sent was carefully coded, using mathematics and universal constants in hopes that intelligence could be understood across species. Despite these efforts, the Vorthik remained silent. They observed, but offered no response. Some scientists hoped this silence was not hostility, interpreting it as careful deliberation or perhaps confusion on the Vorthik's part. But others feared the worst, that silence could be a form of warning, a way of showing that they held the power and humans were still insignificant in their eyes. The first human, diplomatic mission to approach the Vorthik was a mix of excitement and dread. A specially designed spacecraft was sent to a safe distance near one of their outer fleet positions. The mission carried messages, gifts of knowledge, and recordings meant to introduce humans as a species with history, culture, and intelligence. Yet, despite all precautions, the mission yielded only more frustration. The Vorthik refused to communicate. Their ships remained in formation, scanning and observing, but no words were exchanged, no signals returned. For weeks, humanity waited, hoping for a breakthrough. Scientists analyzed the Vorthik's movements, looking for patterns that could indicate intentions or emotional states. Military analysts studied their formations and technology, trying to anticipate strategies and capabilities. The general consensus began to form. The Vorthik were not here for friendship. They were testing, evaluating, and perhaps preparing. Tension began to rise among the global population. Rumors spread quickly. Some people believed humanity had accidentally offended the Vorthik with its signals or prior space activity. Others feared that war was inevitable, and panic quietly grew in pockets around the world. Governments tried to maintain calm, but the truth was that no one knew what the Vorthik were capable of. Their technology was unlike anything humans had seen, their movements precise and calculated, and their silence threatening. Humanity's leaders faced a difficult decision. Should they continue attempts at diplomacy, hoping that patience would eventually be rewarded, or should they prepare for an aggressive response in case the Vorthik attacked first? The decision was complicated by the reality that acting too aggressively could provoke a species far more powerful than humans. Yet hesitation carried its own risk. The possibility of annihilation loomed if the Vorthik decided to strike before humans were ready. Meanwhile, scientists working around the clock began to discover something intriguing. Although the Vorthik refused direct communication, subtle signals in their movements suggested intelligence and strategy. They weren't acting randomly. Every probe, every observation, every scanning pulse had purpose. Some researchers theorized that the Vorthik might value logic and efficiency over emotions, meaning that aggression might be their natural response to perceived threats. Others considered that the species could be territorial and might see humans as encroaching on their space dot. As humanity debated its next move, a shocking incident changed everything. A small human outpost far from Earth was suddenly attacked by a Vorthik vessel. There was no warning, no time to respond. The outpost's sensors were disabled, and critical systems shut down. The humans stationed there were lucky to escape with their lives, but the outpost itself was lost. It was a stark reminder that diplomacy alone could not protect humanity. The attack galvanized global leadership. Emergency meetings were held at unprecedented levels. Military forces were placed on alert, and all space monitoring systems were upgraded and coordinated worldwide. Humanity was no longer waiting for a response. They were preparing for the possibility that the Vorthik might not negotiate at all. But even as preparations for defense ramped up, there were still voices urging caution. Scientists and diplomats argued that provoking the Vorthik could be catastrophic. Their technology was unknown, their strength formidable, and the outcome of open conflict could be devastating. The solution, they insisted, lay in intelligence, observation, and careful strategy. Patience and preparation might be humanity's only chance of survival. During this time, human engineers and strategists worked tirelessly to understand the Vorthik ships and their capabilities. Observations revealed that the Vorthik used energy pulses to disable electronics, had shields that deflected conventional attacks, and moved with speed and precision that humans had not anticipated. But there were also clues that the Vorthik might not be invincible. Their ships seemed to follow strict patterns, suggesting that human strategists could exploit predictability if they analyzed movements carefully. As weeks turned into months, the situation became increasingly tense. Every human observation of the Vorthik fleet was closely studied. Every signal sent in an attempt at peaceful contact was logged, measured, and evaluated for meaning. Humanity's understanding of the Vorthik grew, but so did the awareness that time was running out. One particularly unsettling development was the discovery that the Vorthik were monitoring Earth's own systems. Satellites detected patterns of surveillance that suggested the aliens were tracking human military readiness and scientific activity. Every attempt to study them, every message sent, and every defensive measure taken seemed to be observed. Humanity was being studied like a laboratory specimen, and it became clear that the Vorthik were trying to understand the species before deciding how to act at the same time. The human population began to feel the psychological weight of the situation. News reports, though carefully curated, could not hide the tension. Citizens felt uncertainty, fear, and curiosity in equal measure. Schools and universities hosted emergency briefings and discussions on the science behind the Vorthik, while families speculated about what the future might hold. Artists, writers, and media outlets began portraying humanity's first real contact with another intelligent species, creating stories that blended fact and imagination. The Vorthik had become a constant presence in the minds of every human, a reminder that the universe was no longer a safe and distant backdrop. Despite fear and uncertainty, humanity remained determined. Scientists, engineers, and military personnel worked side by side, sharing information, testing strategies, and preparing contingencies. This was the first time in history that humans faced a truly intelligent species beyond their own world, and the realization inspired both caution and innovation. Humanity's survival depended on understanding, preparation, and adaptability. Then came another attempt at diplomacy, more daring than the first. A small fleet, designed to approach safely and communicate on multiple levels, was launched toward the Vorthic's outer fleet. This time, the humans used complex mathematical models, signals in multiple frequencies, and visual representations of human achievements and culture. They hoped that by showing intelligence, creativity, and reasoning, the Vorthic would see humanity as something worth engaging with rather than destroying. Yet, once again, the Vorthic did not respond. They observed, analyzed, and moved in patterns that suggested evaluation. Some experts interpreted this as indifference, but others believed it was a more sophisticated test, an assessment of human capability, logic, and even patience. Whatever the reasoning, it became clear that humanity was still being measured, judged, and challenged. By now, global leaders reached a difficult conclusion. Diplomacy had limits. Humanity needed to prepare for the possibility of conflict while still exploring every avenue for peaceful resolution. It was a delicate balance, requiring careful strategy, technological advancement, and global cooperation. For the first time, humans recognized that survival in the universe might require more than intelligence. Creativity, or courage, it might require the ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast a species that was both unknown and formidable. Humanity's response began to take shape in two parallel paths. Scientists and diplomats continued to study, analyze, and attempt communication, while military planners developed defensive strategies, trained crews, and tested new technologies designed to counter the Vorthic threat. The work was relentless, driven by urgency, curiosity, and the understanding that failure could mean extinction. During this period, small victories and insights kept hope alive. Engineers discovered ways to partially shield electronic systems from Vorthic pulses, while analysts noticed weaknesses in their scanning patterns. Every new piece of knowledge increased humanity's confidence and strengthened the sense that even in the face of an unknown, powerful species, there were opportunities to survive and even prevail. By the end of this tense period, humanity had learned a vital lesson. The Vorthic were intelligent, powerful, and deliberate. They were not invaders in the conventional sense. They were challengers, testing humanity's resolve, patience, and ingenuity. And in this silent bee, the tension that had been building for months finally broke in a moment of chaos and fear. The humans had hoped that careful observation, cautious diplomacy, and preparation might keep them safe. But the Vorthic, it became painfully clear, had no interest in negotiation. Their first direct act of aggression would forever mark the beginning of humanity's real fight for survival. It began at one of humanity's most remote outposts, situated on the edge of human-controlled space. This outpost had been established as a hub for observation, research, and communication monitoring. It was small, designed to withstand minor threats. But it was not prepared for a species capable of technological dominance on a scale humans had never seen. The morning started quietly, almost deceptively so. Scientists and technicians were working in their labs, recording data, monitoring distant signals, and sending updates back to Earth. Life seemed normal, even routine, but in the cold vacuum of space, normality could change in an instant. And that day, it did. Without warning, the Vorthic ship appeared above the outpost. There was no communication, no signal, only the sudden presence of something vast, alien, and impossible to ignore. The ship hovered silently, almost observing, as if studying the humans below. Then, in a controlled but devastating burst of energy, the Vorthic disabled all electronic systems at the outpost. Communication channels went dark, sensors shut down, and power systems failed. Panic spread quickly among the outpost crew. They scrambled to backup systems, tried to contact Earth, and attempted to understand what had happened. But the Vorthic's technology, was far beyond anything humans had encountered. It was precise, targeted, and impossible to counter with existing defenses. The outpost was effectively paralyzed, and the humans stationed there were suddenly vulnerable in every sense. Back on Earth, monitoring teams watched in horror. The images from satellites and remote cameras showed the outpost systems flickering and then going dark. For the first time, humanity saw the Vorthik as more than a mysterious presence. They were a direct threat. Governments convened emergency meetings. Military analysts updated plans in real time. And the global population was informed that this was not an isolated incident, but the beginning of a larger conflict. The attack had a psychological impact that spread faster than the technology itself. Humanity realized that the Vorthik were not just observing, they were testing. Every act of aggression, every disabled system, was part of a deliberate evaluation of human response. It was terrifying and at the same time instructive. Humans learned quickly that the Vorthik valued efficiency and precision over sheer numbers. Their attacks were calculated, aimed at disabling rather than destroying indiscriminately. In response, humanity began to mobilize in ways it never had before. Defense systems were upgraded at every outpost, and fleets were repositioned closer to areas where Vorthik activity had been detected. Engineers worked day and night to develop countermeasures for the energy pulses that had disabled the outpost. Military strategists revised attack and defense plans, running simulations on every possible scenario. Humanity was learning, adapting, and preparing to fight back. But the scale of the challenge was daunting. The Vorthik did not wait for humanity to recover. Over the following weeks, small but deliberate attacks occurred at other outposts. Each time, humans learned something new about their enemy. The Vorthik could move with incredible speed, were capable of precise energy strikes, and seemed to anticipate human countermeasures. But they also showed patterns of predictability. Their movements, though advanced, were methodical, almost like a chess player thinking several moves ahead. This period became known as the first true test of human resilience. Humanity was no longer dealing with an unknown observer. The Vorthik had crossed the line into active aggression. Yet, in the face of fear, determination grew. Humans had survived countless challenges on their own planet, from natural disasters to human-made conflicts, and now they faced a challenge unlike any before. It required not just bravery, but intelligence, cooperation, and ingenuity on a global scale. Earth's leaders acted decisively. Global alliances strengthened as nations shared technology, strategies, and resources. Military forces that had once operated independently now coordinated in unprecedented ways. Every piece of human knowledge, from physics and engineering to psychology and strategy, was being applied to a single purpose: survival. Humanity was learning to fight as one species, united by the understanding that failure could mean extinction. Meanwhile, scientists made important discoveries that provided hope. They found that while the Vorthik technology was advanced, it was not invincible. Certain energy frequencies could interfere with their systems, and careful observation revealed patterns in their attacks that humans could anticipate. These small insights allowed engineers to develop defensive shields, backup systems, and tactical maneuvers that could counteract some of the Vorthik's advantages. In space, human crews trained relentlessly. Pilots practiced evasive maneuvers against simulations of Vorthik attacks. Engineers tested energy shields, and communications specialists developed secure networks immune to Vorthik interference. Every person involved understood the stakes. This was humanity's first real confrontation with an intelligent species beyond Earth, and failure was not an option. Despite these efforts, the attacks continued. The Vorthik were relentless, but also strategic. They seemed to avoid unnecessary destruction of life, focusing instead on disabling systems, testing defenses, and gathering information. This behavior puzzled humans. Some theorized that the Vorthik were purely logical, measuring efficiency rather than seeking total annihilation. Others worried that this was only a temporary restraint and that full-scale attacks could come without warning. The attacks had another effect. They united humanity in a way that had never happened before. Rivalries between nations diminished as the threat became universal. Scientific communities collaborated across borders, sharing discoveries and technology. Military forces trained and coordinated with unprecedented speed. The Vorthik had unintentionally forced humanity to become stronger, more cohesive, and more capable than ever before. One critical battle stood out. A small human fleet intercepted a Vorthik scouting vessel near one of the outer colonies. The humans were cautious, but determined to test their new strategies. The battle was intense but brief, with humans using a combination of evasive maneuvers, energy shields, and carefully timed counterattacks. For the first time, humans managed to damage a Vorthik ship, proving that even against an advanced species, they could adapt and fight back. This victory, though minor in the grand scale of things, had a profound psychological impact. Humanity realized that they were not helpless. They could learn, adapt, and respond to a species that seemed almost invincible. It was a turning point, inspiring confidence and determination across Earth. People who had once feared the unknown now felt a cautious sense of empowerment. However, the lesson was clear. The Vorthik were still dangerous. Every success required careful planning, intelligence, and coordination. Humanity could not afford mistakes, and every decision carried weight. Scientists, engineers, and military strategists worked tirelessly, knowing that the next encounter could be the difference between survival and destruction. As this first wave of conflict unfolded, humans also began to study the Vorthik more closely. They analyzed movement patterns, energy usage, and ship formations. They discovered weaknesses that had previously gone unnoticed. Each observation was cataloged, tested, and used to refine strategies. Humans were learning that survival against a superior species would not come from brute force alone. It would come from understanding, adaptability, and the ability to anticipate the enemy's moves. Back on Earth, the public followed the unfolding events with a mixture of fear and fascination. News broadcasts, documentaries, and online forums buzzed with updates. Citizens debated strategies, speculated on the Vorthik's motives, and shared stories of bravery and innovation from crews in space. The attacks had shown humanity's vulnerability, but they had also revealed the species' ingenuity and courage. Humanity was not simply waiting to be destroyed. They were learning, fighting, and preparing to survive. By the end of this first real confrontation, one thing was clear. The Vorthik had shown their power, but humans had shown resilience. The attacks had been terrifying, but they had also taught humanity valuable lessons about strategy, coordination, and adaptation. Humans realized that the universe was no longer a safe and distant place. It was a realm where survival required vigilance, intelligence, and unity. The story of the first strike by the Vorthik marked the beginning of humanity's transformation. Fear was tempered by determination, and despair was replaced by innovation. Humans had faced a species that challenged them, and while the danger was real, the response showed that humanity was capable of rising to meet even the most extraordinary threats. The stage was set for what would come next. Humanity had learned that the Vorthik were calculating, strategic, and formidable. They had learned that survival depended on adaptation, cooperation, and courage. And they had learned that the future of Earth might hinge on every decision, every strategy, and every human who dared to confront the unknown. The first battles had begun. After the first wave of Vorthik attacks, humanity realized that waiting and observing was no longer enough. The Vorthik had shown they were deliberate, intelligent, and capable of destruction. But humans were not about to surrender. The lesson from the earlier attacks was clear. Preparation and adaptation were crucial, but so was action. Humanity needed to fight back, not out of anger, but out of survival. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to develop new technologies that could counter the Vorthic's advanced systems. For every energy pulse that disabled human equipment, they found a way to shield critical systems. For every surveillance method used by the Vorthic, humans created ways to hide their movements or mislead the alien sensors. It was a race against time, and every discovery felt like a small victory. Military strategists began to plan coordinated operations. Fleets were organized not just for defense, but for calculated offensive maneuvers. The goal was not to destroy the Vorthic outright. Humans did not yet have that capability, but to disrupt, delay, and force them to reveal weaknesses. Every ship, every crew, and every plan was part of a larger strategy designed to turn the tide. Training became intense. Pilots practiced advanced maneuvers. Engineers simulated attacks and counterattacks. And crews learned to work together in ways never imagined before. They practiced under stress, under pressure, and under the knowledge that a single mistake could be catastrophic. Humanity's approach was not reckless bravery, but careful preparation and precise execution. Each person involved understood that they were part of something much larger than themselves, the survival of the entire species. The first human counterattack was modest but symbolic. A small fleet approached a group of Vorthic scouts near one of the outer colonies. Using newly developed technology, the humans created temporary shields to block the energy pulses the Vorthic used to disable systems. They deployed decoys and maneuvers designed to confuse the alien sensors. The result was not a victory in the traditional sense. The Vorthic ships were not destroyed, but the humans had shown that they could act, resist, and survive against the attacks. This small success boosted morale across Earth. People realized that the Vorthic, while advanced, were not infallible. They could be outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and challenged. Humanity had always relied on ingenuity, adaptability, and cooperation to overcome threats on their own planet. And now those same qualities were proving valuable on a cosmic scale. As the weeks passed, humans became bolder. They began to study the Vorthic tactics more closely, looking for patterns, tendencies, and flaws. Analysts discovered that while the Vorthic were precise and disciplined, they relied heavily on intimidation and force rather than deception or unpredictability. This meant that humans could anticipate their moves, plan around their strengths, and exploit their weaknesses. Engineers developed specialized ships designed for speed, agility, and tactical advantage rather than sheer firepower. These ships could maneuver quickly, avoid energy pulses, and strike at vulnerable points. They were not designed to win a head-on fight, but to create opportunities, gather intelligence, and test the Vorthic's reactions. Humans began to understand that survival depended on clever strategy rather than raw strength. At the same time, Earth's leaders coordinated global resources to support the effort. Every nation contributed expertise, materials, and personnel. Scientists shared breakthroughs, engineers collaborated across borders, and military forces trained together. Humanity's response became a unified effort on a scale never seen before. The Vorthic had forced humans to become stronger, smarter, and more coordinated. And these qualities were starting to show results. One critical breakthrough came when human strategists realized that the Vorthic were vulnerable to disruption of their communication and control systems. While their ships were advanced, they operated as a network, relying on shared signals to coordinate attacks. By creating interference patterns and isolated strikes, humans could temporarily disable sections of their fleet, forcing the aliens to adjust and react. This allowed humans to create small pockets of advantage, turning defense into opportunity. Human crews trained for these coordinated operations relentlessly. Pilots practiced executing complex maneuvers in zero gravity. Engineers tested systems under extreme conditions, and communication teams developed secure networks that could survive Vorthik interference. Every practice session, every simulation, and every exercise prepared humans for the reality of fighting an intelligent and powerful adversary. The first large-scale coordinated operation demonstrated the power of human ingenuity. Multiple fleets converged on a cluster of Vorthik scouts in a carefully planned ambush. Using decoys, shields, and strategic maneuvers, the humans were able to disrupt the Vorthik formation, forcing several ships to retreat. No human lives were lost, and the operation proved that the Vorthik could be challenged effectively when humans worked together with intelligence and precision. This operation marked a turning point. Humanity realized that they were not helpless. While the Vorthik had superior technology, humans had something equally important: creativity, adaptability, and unity. They began to understand that the fight was not only about strength, but also about strategy, observation, and anticipation. Every engagement became a learning opportunity, providing data to refine future tactics and technologies. Human engineers continued to innovate. They developed energy-absorbing shields that could temporarily neutralize Vorthik pulses, automated systems that could predict alien movements, and decoy drones that confused enemy sensors. Each innovation increased the chances of survival and allowed humans to take more calculated risks. It was not about overpowering the Vorthik in brute force, but about outsmarting them in a way they had not anticipated. As humanity gained confidence, Earth itself became a hub of preparation and resilience. Cities focused on advanced research, communication networks became more secure, and every sector of society contributed to the effort. Civilians were educated about the situation, not to incite fear, but to prepare for possible outcomes. Humanity's survival was now a collective responsibility, and every individual played a role. Whether in research, engineering, logistics, or morale, the Vorthik responded to these human actions with curiosity and caution. While they continued to test and challenge humanity, they began to adjust their tactics in response to human strategies. This confirmed what humans had suspected. The Vorthik were intelligent, analytical, and adaptive, but their reliance on predictable methods could be exploited. Humanity's ability to learn and adapt quickly became a key advantage. Over time, humans began to see progress. Minor victories accumulated into a pattern of increasing competence. Each encounter with the Vorthik provided insights that were immediately applied to new strategies. Crews became more skilled, engineers more innovative, and strategists more precise. The fight was far from over, but humanity was no longer passive. They had transformed fear into action and uncertainty into preparation. Perhaps most importantly, humanity learned the value of cooperation. Rivalries that had once divided nations became irrelevant in the face of a common threat. Resources were shared, knowledge was exchanged, and people worked together toward a single goal: survival. The Vorthik had forced humans to confront not only a powerful adversary, but also their own potential as a united species. In space, the battles continued. Humans no longer fled in fear, but approached each encounter with careful planning, strategic patience, and the confidence that they could adapt. Each engagement revealed more about the Vorthik, allowing humans to refine their approach and improve their chances. Humanity had become resilient, clever, and determined in a way that no species had ever experienced on Earth before. By the end of this period, it was clear that humanity had changed. The first wave of counterattacks had proven that survival was possible. Humans had learned to fight intelligently, to adapt quickly, and to coordinate across vast distances. They had discovered that even against a species that seemed superior in technology and strength, ingenuity and unity could make the difference between defeat and survival. The stage was now set for the next phase of the struggle. Humanity had gained confidence, learned to challenge the Vorthik, and transformed fear into strategic action. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, humans were not only defending, they were actively shaping the course of the conflict. The fight for survival had become a test of intelligence, coordination, and perseverance. And humanity was ready to face it head-on in the face of the unknown. Humans had discovered something profound, even against overwhelming odds. The combination of courage, ingenuity, and cooperation could create opportunities where none seemed possible. Humanity had begun to fight back, and in doing so, had taken the first steps toward turning the tide against a species that had once seemed unstoppable. After months of constant tension and battle, humanity was beginning to see the first real signs of progress. The Vorthik, while still formidable and intelligent, were starting to reveal cracks in their once unshakable dominance. Humans had learned from every encounter, every attack, and every failure, and they were finally beginning to apply that knowledge with precision. The stage was set for a turning point in the struggle, a moment that would determine whether humanity would survive or fall. Began with careful observation. Human scientists, engineers, and strategists were now working together more closely than ever before. Every engagement with the Vorthik was studied in detail, with the goal of understanding the enemy's communication patterns, energy usage, and movement strategies. Analysts noticed that the Vorthik, despite their technological superiority, relied heavily on centralized control. Their ships operated in tightly coordinated formations, constantly communicating and adjusting as a network. Disrupting that network, even temporarily, could give humans the upper hand. To exploit this, human engineers developed new technology designed to interfere with the Vorthik communication signals. These systems were not meant to destroy the ships, but to create confusion, slow down their operations, and force them to make mistakes. Small experimental teams were sent on dangerous missions to test these devices in real conditions. Each mission carried immense risk, but the potential payoff was enormous. Humanity understood that intelligence and strategy could be more powerful than brute force when facing a superior enemy. The first mission to deploy the new technology was nerve-wracking. A small fleet approached a cluster of Vorthik ships with decoys and signal disruptors carefully positioned. At first, it seemed nothing had changed. The Vorthik maintained formation and continued scanning. But then, one by one, their ships began to falter. Signals became misaligned, coordination broke down, and confusion spread through their fleet. Human crews took advantage of these brief windows, executing maneuvers that had been impossible in previous battles. For the first time, the Vorthik were not in complete control. This success sent shockwaves through human command centers. For months, humanity had been on the defensive, learning, adapting, and surviving. Now, they were gaining the initiative. Analysts pored over the data from the operation, identifying which strategies had worked and where improvements could be made. Engineers refined the technology, making it more reliable and more effective for future operations. Humanity had learned how to exploit the Vorthik's strengths against them, turning their own advanced systems into vulnerabilities. The turning point continued to unfold with a series of coordinated strikes. Human fleets, now highly trained and synchronized, began to disrupt Vorthik operations on multiple fronts. Using a combination of misdirection, signal interference, and precise maneuvers, humans forced the Vorthik into defensive positions. Ships that had once seemed unstoppable now struggled to maintain control of their fleets. It was a slow, careful process, but each success built confidence and momentum. Humanity was no longer merely surviving, they were actively shaping the battle. Ground teams also played a critical role. On planets and outposts that had once been threatened by Vorthik surveillance and energy strikes, humans worked to reclaim control. Engineers repaired damaged facilities, strengthened defenses, and deployed sensors that could detect Vorthic activity long before it reached critical areas. These efforts allowed humans to maintain stability in their own territories while striking at the enemy, creating a balance that had never existed before. The psychological impact on the Vorthic was subtle but noticeable. Their precise movements began to falter, their attacks became less coordinated, and their response time slowed. Analysts observed patterns suggesting confusion and frustration within the Vorthic ranks. Humanity's relentless adaptation had begun to undermine the aliens' sense of superiority. The species that had once appeared invincible was now showing vulnerability, and humans sensed that the tide of the conflict was slowly turning dot in one decisive engagement. A large human fleet targeted a critical Vorthic command vessel. Using the new communication disruption technology and coordinated maneuvers, the humans created confusion among the surrounding Vorthic ships. For the first time, a key command vessel was isolated and damaged, cutting off coordination for a segment of the fleet. The battle did not destroy the Vorthic completely, but it shattered the illusion of their control and demonstrated that humans could challenge them directly. The victory was more than just strategic, it was symbolic. Humanity had proved that even against a species far superior in technology and experience, careful planning, innovation, and determination could produce tangible results. The crews returned to Earth and forward bases with renewed confidence. The sense of helplessness that had dominated the early months of conflict was fading, replaced by a cautious optimism that survival and eventual victory was possible. Engineers and strategists did not rest. They analyzed every detail of the engagement to identify areas for improvement. Ships were upgraded, systems were refined, and new tactics were developed for the next encounter. Human crews practiced these tactics tirelessly, understanding that each mission would test their skill, coordination, and courage to the limit. Every person involved knew that the survival of their species depended on their performance, and that awareness fueled extraordinary dedication. The Vorthic, meanwhile, were forced to adjust. Their previous strategies of strict coordination and intimidation were no longer sufficient. They began deploying smaller, more cautious patrols, relying on individual ship strength rather than overwhelming force. This shift revealed another weakness. While their technology remained superior, their adaptability had limits. Humans had learned to exploit those limits, and each engagement further strengthened human confidence as the turning point continued. Humanity began to see patterns in the Vorthic behavior that had previously been invisible. Analysts discovered that the Vorthic were highly risk-averse when isolated, suggesting that if humans could divide and isolate sections of their forces, they could achieve strategic advantages without direct confrontation. This insight led to new tactics, where fleets operated in smaller units to manipulate and control the flow of battle. Humans had turned observation into strategy, and strategy into action. Civilian populations also felt the impact of the turning point. People who had once lived in fear of distant attacks now witnessed the first successes of human crews. Broadcasts and reports highlighted the ingenuity, courage, and coordination of human forces. Hope spread, inspiring a renewed sense of purpose and unity. Humanity was learning not just to survive, but to fight smart, and that knowledge was empowering in every corner of the globe. The Vorthic, sensing the shift, attempted countermeasures. They launched strikes intended to regain control and test human defenses. But humans were ready. With each attack, human forces adapted, learning from mistakes and responding with refined strategies. The alien species that had once seemed invincible was now being challenged at every turn. Their technological advantage remained, but it was no longer decisive. Humanity's resilience, creativity, and unity had leveled the playing field in ways the Vorthic had not anticipated. One particularly daring operation involved simultaneous strikes on multiple Vorthic scouting positions. Using coordinated fleets, decoy ships, and signal disruption, humans created confusion across a wide area. The Vorthic response was delayed, fragmented, and less effective than ever. This operation did not destroy the alien forces, but it demonstrated that humans had learned how to influence the course of battle on their own terms. Every crew member, every strategist, and every engineer involved understood the significance. Humans were no longer reacting. They were controlling parts of the conflict as these events unfolded. The sense of momentum was palpable. Humanity had endured the initial attacks, adapted to the enemy's strengths, and exploited their weaknesses. They had learned to work together on a scale never seen before, combining science, engineering, strategy, and courage. Each success reinforced the idea that survival was possible, and even more, that the Vorthic could be challenged directly. The turning point was not just about victories in space. It was also about mindset. Humanity had moved from fear to confidence, from reaction to strategy, and from survival to active engagement. The species that had once seemed untouchable was now being pressured, studied, and gradually outmaneuvered. Humans were learning that intelligence, creativity, and cooperation could overcome technological superiority when applied with precision and determination. By the end of this phase, humanity had transformed. The Vorthic were still a threat, but they were no longer untouchable. Humans had discovered the importance of strategy, the value of adaptability, and the power of unity. They had learned that survival in the universe required not just technology, but intelligence, coordination, and relentless determination. The turning point had arrived, and humanity was finally ready to shape the course of the conflict rather than simply endure it. The story of this turning point was not just about ships, weapons, or tactics. It was about people. Every engineer who stayed awake for hours developing new systems. Every pilot who risked life and limb to execute a dangerous. Humanity had come a long way since the first attacks by the Vorthic. What had begun as fear and uncertainty had transformed into strategy, courage, and unity. By now, humans had learned not only how to defend themselves, but how to challenge a species that once seemed unstoppable. The final phase of the struggle was approaching, and it would test every skill, every innovation, and every ounce of determination that humanity had developed over the past months. The first step in the final campaign was careful planning. Humanity had studied the Vorthic in detail, observing their patterns, strengths, and weaknesses. Analysts knew that the aliens relied on strict coordination, centralized command, and energy-based attacks that could disable human systems. Engineers had developed technology to counter those attacks, including energy shields, signal disruptors, and decoy fleets. Military strategists had prepared maneuvers designed to exploit every weakness, while communication networks ensured that fleets could operate together seamlessly across vast distances. The plan was ambitious. Coordinated strikes across multiple sectors to isolate Vorthic forces, disrupt their command network, and force the aliens into defensive positions. Each fleet had a specific role, moving with precision and timing that required perfect execution. Humans had learned that any misstep could be catastrophic, but confidence ran high. For the first time, humanity believed that they could change the course of the conflict and even secure victory. The campaign began with the deployment of the largest human fleet ever assembled. Ships of all types, from agile fighters to heavily equipped support vessels, moved in synchronization across space. The fleets utilized newly developed technologies to mask their movements, create false targets, and confuse the Vorthic sensors. Every ship had a mission, and every crew member understood the importance of their role. Humanity's survival depended on precision, coordination, and courage. As the fleets approached key Vorthic positions, the aliens reacted predictably at first, moving to counter human advances. But humans had anticipated these moves. Using signal disruptors, decoys, and calculated maneuvers, they created confusion within the Vorthik formations. Ships that had once been coordinated and efficient now struggled to maintain formation. Human forces took advantage of the chaos, striking at vulnerable points, isolating enemy ships, and forcing them to retreat. For the first time, the Vorthik were on the defensive. The battles were intense and relentless. Human crews faced constant danger as they maneuvered to avoid energy pulses, counterattacks, and environmental hazards in space. Pilots executed daring maneuvers to evade enemy fire. Engineers worked under pressure to maintain systems, and strategists adjusted plans in real time based on rapidly changing conditions. Every engagement was a test of skill, bravery, and resilience. Yet humanity pressed forward, driven by the knowledge that failure was not an option. As the campaign continued, the Vorthik began to show signs of weakness. Their previously unbroken coordination was fractured, and their ability to anticipate human movements diminished. Analysts discovered that isolated groups of Vorthik ships were particularly vulnerable to disruption. Human fleets capitalized on this, targeting these isolated units to create gaps in the enemy's defense. Each success built momentum and confidence, proving that even a technologically superior species could be challenged through strategy, ingenuity, and determination. Meanwhile, Earth itself was transformed by the struggle. Cities and research centers had become hubs of innovation, communication, and logistics. Civilians contributed in countless ways, from supporting research and engineering to maintaining morale and resilience. Humanity had become a united species, working together across continents, languages, and cultures. The fight against the Vorthik was no longer a distant battle in space. It was a collective effort that touched every aspect of human life. During one decisive engagement, human forces executed a complex maneuver that had been months in the making. Using decoy fleets, signal disruptors, and rapid strikes, they managed to isolate a major Vorthik command vessel. With the enemy temporarily disoriented, human ships attacked in a coordinated effort, damaging critical systems and forcing the vessel to retreat. The operation was a turning point. The Vorthik had never faced such precise, intelligent opposition. Their confidence was shaken, and the momentum of the war shifted unmistakably in humanity's favor. The victory was not without cost. Human crews faced casualties, ships were damaged, and resources were stretched to the limit. But the triumph demonstrated that humans were capable of sustained, intelligent combat against an advanced species. It also showed that the lessons learned over months of observation, adaptation, and smaller engagements were paying off. Humanity was no longer reacting. They were dictating the terms of battle. Engineers and strategists quickly analyzed the results, refining systems, tactics, and coordination for the next phase. Every engagement provided data that made humans stronger, faster, and more efficient. Fleets adapted to Vorthik countermeasures, improved shield technology, and developed new strategies to exploit weaknesses. It was a relentless cycle of observation, adaptation, and execution. But humanity was now fully prepared for the final push. The Vorthik, recognizing the shift, attempted to regroup and launch counterattacks. They tried to regain control, deploy reinforcements, and re-establish dominance. But human forces were ready. Crews had learned to anticipate patterns, exploit vulnerabilities, and act decisively. The once uncheckable alien formations faltered under coordinated human strikes, and the Vorthik began to retreat from key areas. For the first time, humans had gained a clear advantage in the conflict. The final series of battles showcased humanity's full potential. Fleets operated with near-perfect coordination, integrating technology, strategy, and human ingenuity. Pilots executed daring maneuvers to isolate enemy ships. Engineers maintained systems under extreme stress, and strategists orchestrated attacks that exploited every weakness. Each encounter tested humanity's skills, but also demonstrated their ability to overcome fear, uncertainty, and an adversary far stronger on paper. As the Vorthik retreated, humanity pressed forward. They reclaimed strategic outposts, repaired critical infrastructure, and ensured that Earth's defenses were stronger than ever. The alien species had been challenged, disrupted, and forced to acknowledge the determination and capability of humans. The turning point had arrived, and humanity had seized it with intelligence, courage, and unity. In the aftermath, humans reflected on the journey. The conflict had transformed the species, forcing them to grow in ways that were once unimaginable. Fear had been replaced by confidence, uncertainty by strategy, and vulnerability by resilience. Humanity had faced an advanced, intelligent, and relentless species and had emerged not only alive, but stronger, wiser, and united. The Vorthik, for their part, withdrew from direct engagement. They had tested humanity, sought to evaluate their capabilities, and ultimately found a species that could challenge them in unexpected ways. While their technology remained superior, their assumption of human weakness had been shattered. In that realization, humans found not only relief, but also a profound sense of accomplishment. They had survived the test and proven that adaptability, intelligence, and unity could overcome even overwhelming odds. Earth celebrated the victory quietly but profoundly. Scientists, engineers, pilots, and strategists were honored for their contributions, and civilians took pride in their role in supporting the species' survival. Humanity had learned the importance of cooperation, innovation, and perseverance. They had discovered that survival was not just about technology or firepower. It was about courage, determination, and the willingness to act in the face of uncertainty. The story of the conflict with the Vorthik would be remembered as a defining moment in human history. It was a story of fear and danger, but also of growth, ingenuity, and resilience. Humans had faced annihilation, adapted to extraordinary challenges, and fought with intelligence and courage to secure their future. The lesson was clear. The universe was vast and full of unknowns, but humanity had the strength to face them, learn from them, and prevail. As humanity looked to the stars, the experience had changed them forever. They were no longer a species limited to one planet, fearful of the unknown. They had learned to face advanced adversaries, coordinate across vast distances, and innovate under pressure. Humanity had survived, adapted, and grown stronger, ready for whatever challenges the universe might present in the future. The final chapter of the battle against the Vorthik was not just about victory in combat. It was about proving the enduring power of human intelligence, courage, and unity. Humanity had faced the ultimate test and had emerged triumphant. The Vorthik, once a symbol of fear and unknown power, had been challenged and had retreated. Humanity had endured, adapted, and prevailed stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. And so, the story of the last species that challenged humans ended not with defeat, but with triumph. Humanity had faced a species that seemed unstoppable, had survived impossible odds, and had claimed their place in the cosmos through intelligence, strategy, and unyielding determination. The universe had been tested, and humanity had risen to meet it, proving that no challenge, no matter how great, could break the resolve.